late Chief Justice came to the High Court in 1989. It is important to state that he was recommended by the Bar Association for appointment straight to the Court of Appeal at that time. But he, in humility, to have the grasp of the mechanics of the bench at the trial level, opted to start at the High Court level. I should think, and I believe, without any fear of contradiction, that his rise from the High Court bench to the Supreme Court is unprecedented in the annals of the history of the judiciary. From 89 to November 95, he was already in the Supreme Court. The period of just 6 years. This tells a lot about the man. The rest that I've been saying will just be infilling the gaps. I had a singular privilege of coming to the Supreme Court at the same time with him. When we started, I found myself drawn very closely to him for his qualities. He was friendly, he did everything with quality and commitment. Very early on the Supreme Court, he either gave the unanimous judgment of the Supreme Court or the lead judgment. It is difficult to think of any of his judgments that is not of this stature of landmark. But I refer to a few of them. In the celebrated case of J.H. Mensah versus Attorney General, where the ministers of state were nominated to the office felt they should be exempted from parliamentary vetting. The then opposition leader, political stalwart, J.H. Mensah, brought a challenge in the Supreme Court. It was the late Chief Justice Acquah who gave the lead judgment and established very key 3 principles, among others. The first happened to do with the question of political question under the Constitution, whether the Supreme Court has jurisdiction to delve into a matter which can be termed or classified as a political question. As we know, in the US, this has a great role. But Chief Justice Acquah, then Acquah JSC, said that kind of legal thinking could not sit well under our constitutional dispensation, namely the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. So he persuaded his senior colleagues to move away from it. The second important legal principle he laid down had to do with what constitutes a moot action. Because it was contended that, after all, subsequently the ministers were in place, and therefore. And he's laid a principle that an action cannot be considered moot unless it is of such a nature that it is incapable of arising again subsequently. And as much as our constitutional system is a recurrent one, 4-year tenure, there was nothing moot about the action. The third principle established, which has helped the Supreme Court eternally, is the question of the holistic construction of the Constitution. The Constitution should not be construed piecemeal, but should be considered as a whole, and each provision should be interpreted in relation to the other, all working towards the establishment of a certain constitutional principle or purpose. This has always been quoted. I quote it frequently in my judgments personally. Then also came the famous case of Yeboah versus the Attorney General. Here was the then vigorous opposition leader, Judge Mensah, and a challenge was taken to he was a member of Parliament, yes, definitely, that he was not properly elected on 2 grounds, that he did not qualify to be a parliamentary candidate, he did not reside for the constitutional period in the constituency for which he contested the election, he did not hail from there, etc. We were confronted with a very monumental precedent in the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Williams and Wedima. This was a Battle of Waterloo, because that court was comprised of the some of the best legal brains in our legal history. Azukrab, CJ, Apalo, so and others. And we looked at the constitutional provisions, those relating to challenges to parliamentary elections as against presidential election. And we thought that the Supreme Court, Williams and Wedima, could not have been right in saying that the Supreme Court had concurrent jurisdiction in electoral matters relating to parliamentary elections. Obvious problem was the courage to disagree with these awesome legal giants of the bench. I were convinced. And my good friend Justice Acquah, when he asked where I stood in the matter, I said, well, I think we should depart from this. He said, well, it's a difficult matter, but on reflection, he will go with us. So, by majority, we departed from Williams and dismissed that action. In recent times, there has been some bit of frustration about it, but I have no doubt that at the appropriate time, we will revisit matters if possible, reinstate that precedent. When he became Chief Justice, nobody was surprised. I personally, looking at his performance on the Supreme Court, thought that it was just a question of time. I mean, he had established himself solidly as a justice of the Supreme Court in so many ways. Now, when he became Chief Justice, he concerned himself more with administrative matters. But even there, he still laid down an epoch-making precedent. In the case of Luke Benson versus the Attorney General, I quite recall vividly that on the eve of the 2004 elections, new constituencies were created. And the question was whether those constituencies could be applied to the upcoming election. And legal thinking at that time was solidly of the view that no, those constituencies could only be activated after the term of the next parliament. So if I'm right, awesome legal brains like the late J.B. Darocha, and I think Professor Isiki Komado, well, that view too. And it seemed to be obvious that that should be so. However, when the case came to the court, Chief Justice Acquah wrote the unanimous judgment. And when I heard, I said, oh, well, this looks a bit awkward. Nonetheless, on the eve of the 2008 elections, the same matter came up. This time round, it was sought to say that that decision was wrong. We should depart from it. Then he introduced rapid computerization of the court system. And he developed the first annual report, the Judicial Service, so that at a glance one could see where the judiciary stood in terms of its functions and its delivery. He was definitely poised for greater projects, and that's why it's such a great pain that death did not do us the favor of letting him continue to the end. And so this is the man, and I'm happy we are holding this anniversary to remember him, immortalize him. It's important that we celebrate our heroes. If this were not done, such a person would have just been buried in the dust of history unjustifiably. Needless to say, he could not have done all these things without the support of his wife, who sits first seat in front of me, front row. A woman of personality, of aura, of wisdom. So he was lucky to be so armed maritally. And it did him well, and to our benefit. So we are very grateful to you. And so also to the children who did not ruffle his life, because life on the bench is one of dignified imprisonment. Although I think with the course of time, the thickness of this seclusion should thin out a bit. Because after all, human beings are human beings. They need some amount of socialization without prejudice to propriety, to be able to function well. To his daughter, who has done law, I would call upon you to emulate your father's record. It is attainable, and you have a precedent just by you, His Excellency the President of Ghana. Look at his track record. He virtually walked the same road of success as his late father did. And so I bring the curtain down here, hoping that we'll keep on revisiting the memory and celebration of this very distinguished colleague, Justice of the High Court, Justice of the Court of Appeal, Justice of Supreme Court, and Chief Justice of Ghana, the late Chief Justice George Kingsley Acquah. Thank you.